Hello.
Hi, how are
Hi, you good?
you? I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you very much, Dolapo. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's a pleasure. We're just going to wait for a few more people just to come in.
okay.
But thank you so much. How are you
Yeah,
this evening?
not bad. Where are you based? How's the weather where you are? Let's talk about.
I'm in Greenwich, so it's
Oh, okay.
okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been
What
okay
about
since
you?
yesterday. I'm in Northwest, so Mill
Okay.
Hill.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay. That's
so
good.
that's where I am. That's my
All right.
patch. I love your
Oh,
hair,
thank.
representing the
Say again.
blonde.
Sorry.
I said I love your hair, representing
Oh,
the
thank you.
blonde look.
Thank you. Thought I'd try
Yeah.
a new color this year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. But no, thank you very much. I mean, we can get started because
Okay,
we've got a
great.
few people that have joined us.
All
Um,
right.
why don't you start by telling us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm Dolapo Oni. For those that don't know, that's I have the handle Property Mom, and that's because the two big, loves of my life, in addition to my husband, of course, are property and the kids. So it made sense that Property Mom was my handle. But my own background is more in investments, property investments, and based off of that, I've developed a company, Citygate Property, and Citygate Property mainly acquires property. Refurbishes and then puts it back on the market either to rent or to sell. So that's what the core business is. But
Okay.
alongside that, I do mentorship, I do training, I do quite a bit. So but it's all property related because I just love all things property, I would say. So that's my background.
That's great. I
Yeah.
believe you've got a family as well because your handle is Property Mom, isn't it? So I assume you've got a
Yes,
family. How
I
many
do.
children do you have?
The two kids. So two kids, um, 5 and 3, and really, really
Okay.
boisterous 5 and 3. So it really take a lot of my energy as well. So sometimes I know with like posting and trying to keep up with the business and all of that,
Yeah.
it can be quite a lot. So I don't know if you have kids. Do you juggle this with kids or?
No, I do, but my
Oh,
son's a lot older, so
oh, that's
I don't have. Yeah, so
you don't
it's
have the
yeah,
childcare and the
yeah,
lockdown.
it
Yes,
is.
indeed. So.
So how do you? Because obviously some of the people that are signed on are also mothers, and they could be also first-time investors. How do you balance family life and property investing then?
Yeah, I love that question because I get it quite a bit. And I normally say it depends on what stage you are in your property journey, right?
Yeah.
So there was a time in my property journey where I call it the easy years, where things were on a plateau. I already knew the strategies that worked. I'd already, created all the processes. It worked well. So those times, it wasn't really difficult to manage the property business and my family life. At the time, actually, my kids were younger. So,
Okay.
so it was easy I wouldn't say easy, but at least it was more manageable. I think
Okay.
with the lockdown, my business also, kind of, how we were talking about pivoting. So I pivoted to a few different businesses. And when I say to mothers that when you're starting out in property,
Yeah.
just know there are going to be lots of sleepless nights. There's
Okay.
going to be, you just brace yourself. But that will probably
Okay.
last a year or
Okay.
two. Just sacrifice, make the sacrifice, between 6 and once you put the kids to bed. So anytime from like 7, 8 till
Yeah.
12, if you can do work, then do work, or like the way I do it, so I can spend time with my husband. I'll leave the hours of 7 to about 10 free. So we'll
Okay.
just do our own stuff. And then from 10, I'll sleep and then wake up really early. So I'll
Okay.
wake up at like 4 a.m. so I can get a start on my day, and then I can do a lot of stuff when the
Okay.
kids are still asleep. So that's how it's worked for me. But I think you have to find out when in your own day, in your day schedule, that
Yeah.
you can dedicate on uninterrupted time towards building your business. Otherwise, it's just gonna take forever. It's just not gonna take off.
Okay, that's
So
fine. So are you full time in property now or?
I
Oh
am.
wow,
So
awesome!
yeah.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you. So that journey, that was 10 years ago that I quit my job in the
Okay.
city. I used to work in the city. I had, a good job, nice life, and I
Yeah.
wasn't even married at the time. But and the thing about property is funny because I always thought it would be a side hustle with my full-time job. But I
Yeah.
think after my third deal, I realized this is where my passion is. I
Okay.
never got my work like I got property, right?
Yeah.
So I knew this was something I needed to move into full time, and I've never looked back for 1 second since then.
All right, that's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
So what made you start in property and why property?
That's a question. I sometimes go back to think of my earliest thoughts about it because now it seems like it's natural, like I always did. But I think my first thoughts would have been planted from my dad.
Okay.
So I know for a long time I was trying to get my mom into property, but she
Yeah.
just wasn't quite into it. But because maybe he was trying to get her into it, it just became a seed planted. So I said that's my earliest recollection of wanting to do anything property related. So it was
Okay.
always lingering. But I would say the first time I really got property was when I moved to the UK. I was based in the US previously.
All right.
And, I was working there and I tried to dabble into property there, but I didn't quite, I think with property, especially for newbies, it takes a while. There's a bit of a learning curve at the beginning. You hear these
Yeah.
terms, you hear all these different, concepts, but you don't quite get it. And I
Okay.
think it's when I moved to the UK and I started researching, going for auctions, and just going to see what was happening, it started to make sense. I started to understand how financing worked, how you could
Okay.
leverage, how you could then buy property, not necessarily needing to have all of the funds up front, or how you could work with somebody else in a joint venture. Those types of things started to come to place for me. And then, that's how I got into it.
Okay.
First as a side hustle before
All
I then
right.
went full time
Okay.
into it.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So tell us about your first deal or your first, or you could give us an example of an auction deal actually, because I know
Okay.
you're very experienced with auctions and you post a
Yeah.
lot of stuff about auctions. So if you could give us your first deal in the auction room, how was
Okay.
that?
Yeah. So I would say with auctions, I started in property, and I say this, you can go first with auctions, but I would say first buy your property, the traditional way and see how
Okay.
that works first before you go nose dive into auctions. But some people do that. Now,
Yeah.
for me, my first deal was actually I would say my second deal. So I'd done one where it was just a simple property investment joint venture with a friend. Then this was then my first property that I happened to have gone and looked through the catalog, searched online, and then decided, you know what, let me just go and see what happens at the auction. So
Okay.
at this point, this is 2009. The market is completely in disarray. We're in the heat of
Yeah.
the financial crisis. Lehman
Yeah.
Brothers has just toppled over. So all that is going on in the meanwhile. And
Yeah.
then there I am sat at the auction, and properties were just all over the place. Like now we're struggling to find properties. Then that was not a problem at all. The
Okay.
fear then was that you were going to buy a property and then property prices were just going to go further down. There wasn't any indication property prices were going to go up.
Yeah.
So I'm there looking for another property, which was a 2-bed, and then a property came on. So now imagine let's say my lot was like 100. This is now lots, say lot 70.
Okay.
And so a random 2-bed flat, it's in Southeast London, shows up, and I wasn't really paying attention. And then I heard the guy going one, going two. And the only thing that had drawn my attention to it is because a friend of mine had bought a property in that same block
Okay.
just the year before for almost double the price. So
Right.
here I am
Okay.
in auction. He paid about almost 200K for the property, and now I'm in auction, and it's going 1, 2, and he's about to hit the hammer on like 95K or something. And I'm like, how is this possible? This is a flat in London. There's no way. So I just put
Right.
my hands up. So it was literally, I hadn't seen it, but I was like, what's the worst that can happen here? We have 100K to play with.
Okay.
So yeah, so that was my first, and it worked out really well. It turned out that the people never actually, I don't think anybody lived in the property. It was a
Okay.
repossession. I walked in, and in 2 weeks it was rented out.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah,
That
it
sounds
was a
really
really good
good.
deal. It
Oh, wow,
was.
that
I've had
sounds
some more
really good.
difficult stories for sure, but that was a really good first foray into
Okay.
auction property buying.
That's good. So I guess you said you actually found the deal while you were in the room. Did you? You obviously didn't have time to read the legal pack, did you?
No,
Okay.
I love that.
Was
Okay,
there
so
anything you then discovered after that that possibly may have changed your mind, or
no, so this
everything
is the
was fine?
point, right? And I think honestly, I wouldn't suggest that anyone does this, obviously, because it's such a. In retrospect, I think sometimes naivete is also good, because I would still do that deal today, to be fair, because
Okay.
what I did was I always look at the worst case scenario in any decision making I do. I say, what's the
Okay.
worst case scenario here? So I've
Okay.
seen somebody else buy property in this same block last year. this building was about 3 years old, by the way. So it wasn't some old building where we'll now find subsidence underneath or anything. It was just because of what was going on in the market. So people were losing properties because they were just being repossessed, or people were literally walking away from their properties. So the way I rationalized it was, if somebody, and the person that I'm talking about that bought property is a very analytical guy, you know, the type of person that has models before they make any decision.
Yeah.
So I already knew that, okay, this person has a property that's double the price of this property I'm going to buy. So worst case scenario, I'm in it, but I get there, I need to change the bathroom, I need to change the kitchen. Do you understand? Like I just ran through, okay, what's the worst case scenario here? And then I'm on the auction. Remember that then there was still online. So I went through the auction pack, not like I would have known what I was doing, because I quickly just kind of just glanced through, because I was looking at the page, right? Yeah. So there wasn't anything that looked like there was an issue to be worried about. So that's why I did it, right? But you know, if it was an old building, or if it was a freehold, for instance, where I was buying the entire block. Remember, this is a flat within a block. So even if there's subsidence in the whole building, it doesn't matter. It's the block's problem. Yeah. But when you're buying your own property where you are going to own the freehold, if there's subsidence, if there's issues with the roof, all of those costs are yours.
Yeah, that's
true.
So
do you understand? So I wouldn't have made that move if it was a house. But because it was a flat, I felt more reassured to take that risk.
So. No, that's fantastic, actually. I think that sounds like a great win, because if you're saying it was around 90K and your friend had already bought it previously for double that, you obviously had that, you know, potential 100K equity to play with, whether it was fixing it or throw it back into the auction again. So that sounds like a fantastic deal. That's really good. So in terms of challenges that you found, particularly with your auction purchases, is there anything that you want to share with our viewers that would be quite useful for them to know?
Yes, indeed. And in fact, when I run mentorships on auctions, I have one cardinal rule: always have a backup plan. You know, like never, especially when you're starting out, never rely on, say, just one thing. I mean, in terms of your financing, in terms of the property you want to buy, in terms of your exit, just always have a backup. That's the only way to survive auctions. So I remember before I knew that one of the worst things that ever happened to me was literally going through the entire process. I bought the property in auction, you know, paid my 10%. Remember, this is the one big fear that people have with buying an auction, is because on the day the hammer goes down, you literally have to deposit 10% of the value of the property.
You do.
And if you can't complete, as I was speaking to a colleague of mine earlier, she put a property on the auction and literally the person couldn't complete. And so the person forfeited 10% of their deposit. Wow. So here I am going through the process. And you remember that properties, you know, I call it the 6-figure mistakes. You know, property values are like, I'm based in London. So any property you're buying is a 6-figure, you know, you're talking about at least 100K. So that means you've already dropped 10,000 at the very least. And that's the very least, right? So, you know, at this point, this property was a 250,000 pound property, and I deposited 25,000. On the last day of the auction cycle, so that's the completion process for buying the property, it was a new lender I was using. So this is what I'm talking about, backup plans. I didn't have any backup. I didn't have anything. This lender pulls out on the last day I'm supposed to complete. Literally, I was waiting for money to transfer from their lawyer to my lawyer to complete. And they just called me and said, I'm sorry, something doesn't check out. We're going to have to pull out of this deal. And I'm on the phone, like literally shaking, because I'm like, I don't think you understand. I'm literally about to lose 25,000 pounds. And is this 25,000 pounds at any time is too much money to lose. And I just was on the phone. I'm sure I cried. I'm pretty sure, because I just would not have known what to have done. But at this point, I was already midway through my property journey. I think I'm maybe about 4 years in. So what bailed me out was somebody I'd worked with before, a bridging lender. And this is why it's always good when you're in property. I always say it's a long game, and you don't know when you're going to have to call on favors. So it's somebody that was a bridging finance company. Now there are different types of bridging companies. There's some where they actually are in direct receipt of funds. So they are working on behalf of the funds, you know, the funds or whatever fund source they're getting their funds from, as opposed to people who are bridging companies that are brokers that still need to rely on a third party. So this was somebody that I loaned directly from, and his company was a bridging company. And I had really, like the bridging that I had originally gotten from him, this was maybe 2 years before, had lapsed, and I had consistently paid throughout. So I had built a very good goodwill with him.
Okay.
So I just called him up. I said, Peter, I'm in a mess. I don't even know. I have literally 3 days to 5 days to complete.
Yeah.
And he said, are you good for it? That's all he asked. He said, are you good for it? And I said, I am. I promise you. And that's how, literally, I had a good lawyer as well, and he just begged the other side for like 2 extra days.
Yeah.
And then we were able to complete. And I still own the property till today. But yeah, that was a close shave.
No, that sounds good. That sounds good. So is your strategy that you buy with bridging finance and then you refinance and then rent out? Is that your key strategy?
Correct. Yeah. So I tried to, so originally when I got started, I used to buy with traditional mortgages, and I still will from time to time, depending on the strategy that I'm employing.
Okay.
But what I found is that traditional companies don't like that. So I realized that there were some of them in which I was now finding getting mortgages later on more difficult, because they started to notice a trend that I was taking these non-ERC, like these mortgage loans that didn't have an early repayment charge on the back end.
Okay.
Meaning I could come out of them at any point during the term. Right. So what would happen is I would just take those loans. They're much cheaper than bridging. And then within 6 months, I remortgage out of them. But they noticed a trend. I was doing that quite a bit.
Okay.
So because of that, then there's some companies that started to blacklist me. Like basically, if I came in trying to apply, they would just be like, oh no, we're not lending. So that means they already noticed a trend. So because of that, I then realized actually makes more sense to pay the bridging.
Okay.
And then 6 months later refinance, or 6 to 9 months later.
Okay. So are those type of lenders still available on the market today, where you don't have this period that you're tied into them?
Yeah, there are.
Right.
And I would say that you just have to be careful. And that's why I said that sometimes I will still use them depending on the size of the deal, because sometimes by the time I calculate how much bridging is going to cost, it's pretty much wiping out so much of the profit. So sometimes I'll decide, you know what, I may hold on to this property slightly longer, just so it doesn't seem like a 6-month turnaround, right?
Right.
Just so I can hold on to it for a bit longer, and then by the time I refinance, it doesn't seem quite so quick. But I still will, I think of most of my auction purchases, about 90% of them will go through with bridging.
Okay. All right. Okay. No, that's fantastic. So you've been in property for quite a long time. You've probably picked up on a lot of key strategies that are always on the market, whether it's rent to rent or HMOs and things like that. What would you say is the best strategy out there, especially for somebody who's really starting out? Yeah.
So I normally say with the people I talk to about this is, it really does depend on your initial starting amount. So that initial capital that you saved up or that you have access to.
Okay.
So if you're starting with anything, say sub 10,000, then, rent to rent, that is usually a good entry point, because anything in the 7,000, 10,000, you should be able to get a rent to rent that is cash flowing.
Okay.
And what that will do is that'll get you starting to get your feet wet within property. You'll start to see how the numbers work, how to analyze, a rent-to-rent deal, which is kind of a precursor towards how to then analyze real buy-to-let deals. Okay. So if you're in the 10,000 range, I'd say that. But you can actually start with, like I have a whole thing on my podcast, Property Mom podcast, where I talk about the 14 ways you can get started in property without any money. So in that case, all you're really doing is you just need to, the amount to set up like a website, or do you understand? Like stuff like that. It's really more now down to your sweat equity. It becomes more about you reaching out to people, building contacts, all of that to drive business. So it becomes more of a business thing than a property thing in a sense, but it's all within property. There's so many services within property. Then if you have anything over 50K, pretty much you can buy property. It's just depending on where you want to go in the UK. And do you want to go up north, or do you want to, invest down south? So.
Okay. No, that's good. Well, I mean, people always ask this question. What about in terms of your education, like your property education? I'm sure you made some kind of investment to get you to this point.
Yeah.
What kind of advice could you give to people who are thinking of getting into mentoring, and how it can add value to their journey?
Yes. So I think when I started out, I didn't value mentoring, because at the time mentoring was really expensive. It's not like now you can get a pretty good mentor for a good price, right? Then it was like, if you didn't have your double digits, like literally something like 10K and above, you're not getting a mentor. So for me, I just thought, well, if I have this money, I'll rather do my investments with that money than actually park it with someone. But in retrospect, I think of so many deals and so many things I would have gotten into that I didn't have any idea about. Like some of the deals that I found out, say, midway through my term, would have, if I could go back, it would have informed the properties I was done some training.
Sorry, apologies.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, did I? Oh, okay. No, I was saying that, so some of the strategies I then discovered midway through my journey, if I knew them, let's say I paid for mentoring just the 5 years earlier, then, like I would have, there's so, we talk about leaving money on the table. There's so many deals that I did at the beginning where I just had a very straight idea of how to make money in property. You buy the property, you refurbish the property, you put it on the market, which is completely different. There's so many ways you can add value to the property, do all sorts of things to generate income. And I know every deal that I did between, say, the year 2010 to 2013, I literally was just dropping like 10,000, 20,000 on the table, 40,000 even. There were some deals I went back and recalculated. And if I knew some of the things I knew now, I would have made at least 30,000 to 40,000 on top of it. So, sometimes it's a false economy. You think you're saving money, but actually because you don't know what you don't know, you're losing money every deal you're doing. So I say, if you have the initial capital to get to buy property, then you want to get some mentoring, because the mentoring will give you a clean, like for instance, with my mentoring, I literally will talk you through a 3-year plan to get you to £1 million portfolio, because I know exactly the properties you need to buy literally now, that within 6 months, 1 year, you can refinance and then keep building that to then get your £1 million portfolio. But if you were trying to do it on your own, you'd literally be buying the property, waiting, then buying, then do you understand how long is that going to take? So it's really down to the person to determine what goals they have and where they want to go. Some people don't actually want to stress out, right? They just want a simple buy to let, and those people, that's fine, and you can run your property journey that way as well. But I would say you should still get the basic level of training, because there's still the management side of it. There's still the best ways to to refurbish a property, to make sure that you're not just giving away your money to builders. I've heard some really, really terrible stories about builders just basically taking advantage of people who don't know what they're doing. Even I that know what I'm doing, they're still trying. Not to talk of.
True.
Do you understand? So, if you're a woman, you're just, and you don't know what you're doing, just know you're getting ripped off. And, there's no easy way to say it. It's just the way of every 10 builders, no offense to builders, they're amazing. They've done well for me. But of every 10 builders, you can be sure that only one of them will be that honest to let you know that this is where you're losing money and I can help you. Like, that's never happening.
Okay. No.
So
it's interesting that you brought that point up about women and builders, because I actually felt the same thing, love. I was looking for a builder, and you can kind of sense when it's true, but I kind of see it when they're taking advantage of you purely because you are a woman and they expect you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, it's weird though. It's not a way of working, but I guess they're used to seeing a lot of male figures within the property industry, and I guess maybe when it's a man to man, they kind of have a different language. I guess. What do you think it could be?
Honestly, you're totally correct. You're totally correct, because I see how they treat my husband. So I'm the one that's running the property business, right? But anytime I take my husband along with me, then it's like the shift just goes to him, right? And I'm like, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to be offended by this, because tomorrow I'm coming back alone anyway. So we'll have the conversation. But, I just noticed that sometimes, I've had some very condescending builders work with me. And it's true. I really didn't know what was, especially when I get into construction and stuff. That's not my forte at all. I do it only because it's a means to get into the real end, which is the interior. I love putting in new bathrooms, new kitchens, and styling out the house. But all the construction, for me, it's like, just do your work and just get me the finished product, right? So they can tell that I lack interest in all that stuff, but I don't lack interest in the money. So I'm very on top of my money and how I manage my money throughout my build. So while they're talking technicalities, I'm like, how much is it going to cost? And then I'll go and do my research and check with like structural engineers, check with other people to make sure that they're not trying to rip me off. You know, because normally with these things, there's always a band. So as long as you're within that band, that's fine. But once you know, like somebody comes and said, oh, so there was one project in which he was going to build foundations, and he was saying, oh, it's going to cost 10,000 for every square meter. And I was like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Like, so I went back, did my research. I came back, I said, no, this is not going to work. We're either going to end this project here. And you have to be willing to, you know, one thing I say is if you've managed your project well, you can always walk away from that project. There's never a point where a builder should have so much over you that you can't walk away. And so, in fact, this weekend, the builder I'm working with, because I have 3 projects on the go right now, and there's one of them in which I really like the builder. We've gotten along, but I think he's run into some financial problems. It's not my problem, to be honest, but I still talk to them, because that's one of the things is that when you're working with builders, you have to appreciate that they're human. They go through their stresses. And so you have to kind of be there. So that's why some people don't like this whole side of things, because they're like, who has time to be, you know, like, you know, listening and talking and trying to, anyway. So this weekend, he literally was having a meltdown, which was his own problem, but he was bringing it to me. And so I had to tell him and talk to him. So I talked to him and I pacified him. And I said, you know what? These are the problems of running a company. That's your problem. But we have a commitment to completing this project. Do you understand? So, you know, and he was like, oh, pay me this. And I said, no, this is not how I work. I'm, you know, even though your schedule was your schedule, I also am monitoring what you're doing based on the financials. So at the point where I feel like I'm paying you too much, I'll stop. Because I need to be able to walk away from any builder at any time is my own policy. So, you know, so that's just my own thing. Working with builders, you just have to get very savvy, you know, and protect your purse, basically.
No, that's some really good tips. I assume a lot of this has come from the long experience that you've had with working with builders as well.
Yeah, a little bit.
No, that's good. That's fantastic. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us in terms of, you know, you've mentioned a lot about mentoring. You've obviously got a world of experience. You're very, you know, you've got auction properties as well. How can people get in touch or, you know, find out more about what you do, or if they want to work with you in the future as well?
So, yeah, thank you so much. So with me, I tend to want to know about people. You know, one of my sister was around and was like, you talk so long on the phone. I'm like, no, because I just want to know, you know, it's not like, for me, it's a call, you know, it's like what you call like an inquiry call. But I also want to know what the person is dealing with, right? And what they're grappling with and where they are and all of that. So for me, I normally would say, so I have, a phone, like a line on my website, so propertymom.co.uk. So literally you'll see up there as one of the first things you see, just book a call. And you can just call me if it's anything you're interested in or you just want to talk about property. Because what I do is I just want to find out where people are and then I can point them in the right direction. So an example, for instance, part of my business, I do a lot of portfolio analysis. So I'll look through somebody's portfolio and say, okay, this is where you can add value to this, you know, because I've done that quite a bit with my own, especially during the lockdown, where I look through my current portfolio and I could see, oh, okay, I can do this here. I can do you understand? And just re-evaluate your portfolio. So I do that. So sometimes I'll meet somebody and that's all they need at that point because they don't necessarily have access to cash. But then we can release equity from their portfolio. We can, you know, so that's one service. Then another person can call and then they need to understand a bit more. They want to get into property full time. They have a full-time job. So we'll create a plan, right? So it tends to be a conversation. There's no real one size fits all. But at some point what happens is I find that I'm talking to similar people, all that have the same situation. So I just then do a group. You know, usually maybe it'll be like 5 or 6 people together. If they all want to learn about property investing, then I'll just band them together. It works out better for them because it's cheaper than me one-on-one as well. So yeah, so that's kind of the way I work. It's, you know, it's just book a call and then I'm quite happy to take it from there.
All right. No, that's fantastic. That sounds really good. I'm just going through to see if we've got any questions from anybody. I think we've just got a couple of hellos and highs.
Hellos and highs. Yeah. I'm interested to know if people are investors already or if they are, you know, if they're new or if they're already investing.
Does anyone have any questions? It's a quiet crowd today.
It is. It is. But yeah, your followers tend to be, what's your demographic of followers?
It's mainly, yeah, there's some new people as well who come on, and then a lot of them are, you know, people that that I've partnered up with at the project and stuff like that. So it's a mixture, and then some people just come on, I guess. Dami saying he's newish. Dami, you're not newish.
Exactly. I was going to
Your
say that that name
experience, you're not
sounds
newish at
familiar.
all. What was your question? We've got a young lady who said she's new. She wants to start. Do you have a particular question you'd want to ask? I think Dami said
Davo is calling me tonight. Okay, very good. You can call me later. I'm new here to learn. Yeah. Okay, Dami's being cheeky.
Yeah, Dami's definitely being cheeky.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, so that's me.
No, but it's been great. It's been really great. I'll share obviously your handles and everything so that people can get in touch with you. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we've got a question. Do you source the interior designing?
You would think I would, right? But that's my favorite part of the whole thing. In fact, I had that conversation today where somebody was talking about the fact that, oh, she gets her builder to do the kitchen and do the bathroom. And I was like, oh, hell no. That's what I'm waiting for. That's the whole point of doing the refurb, is to get to the point where I do the design of the kitchen and do the design of the bathroom. So those are my favorite things to do. So I would say that in terms of interior design from the project standpoint, I take full control of that. Now, when it comes to soft furnishing and things like that, I like that as well, but I could outsource that. So I think if I got bigger, where I had maybe 10 projects on the go, then yeah, probably outsource some of the interior design. If it was like I had a number of HMOs and they all had to be done, right? Then yeah, I would outsource that. But right now, my portfolio is still manageable. At any point in time, I'm mostly doing maybe 3-4 max. So I can easily do the interiors though.
And how are your 3 developments going, and what systems have you got?
What type of systems? So for me, systems tend to be Google spreadsheets. So I'm not quite, like up there with any real systems. I do have, in terms of managing with the builders and stuff like that, then it's just basically, they know, a lot of them have worked with me. So they know they know how I do my things. One of them we've just finished literally today. I had tenants move in today, and those guys, they know we just work together on WhatsApp. There's no real system, to be honest. I think on the scale I'm on, it's still very manageable. It's not, I think recently, because I am looking to develop another side of the business, which is more towards, now that I have quite a number of properties in my portfolio, more of like a letting side of it. So now there, I would start putting in place systems for reaching out to clients and trying to get more properties on, because I already have staff anyway. So then, ask me this in another maybe 6 months to a year, then I'll have more defined systems in place for that. But in terms of the property, the actual developments themselves, Google spreadsheets, which have all of my, all the different what they call it, things that I use in the properties. So because I've been doing that quite a bit. So like the bathrooms, where I get my bathrooms from, where I get my kitchens from, all the different units that go into those properties, they're all on Google spreadsheets with the links to those websites. So that's really where all of the management comes from. And then the rest is just liaising with the builders. They go pick up all the things, or it gets delivered. So I find developments really light touch. I think when I was deep into rent-to-rent service accommodation, then I had systems like up the wazoo. I was using Rental United as a channel manager, and then using Kigo. I know that these are very specific to rent-to-rent service accommodation. Type of business, but there you have to have systems, because you have people checking in, checking out. There's a lot of activity and movement. I find with the developments, it's very slow burning. As long as you know where your things are being sourced from, it's not much. Yeah. Okay.
No, that's good. We've got another question. What tip would you give? Because he's saying that it's predominantly a male-dominated area. So what tip would you give to, I guess, the ladies on the live call today.
I know. I love that question. And I love the fact that you use confidence, because recently I'm going through a mentorship right now, and they make you kind of think through, okay, what are the top qualities that you want to, in order to be successful, so I came up with different things that I thought. And one thing that resonated with me was confidence. Like once you have confidence of the area in which you operate in, confidence of the strategies, like confidence, that word is a really powerful word when it comes to property. Yeah. And it makes all the difference, because even the confidence that you have with talking to builders and taking, taking your own stand and standing your ground, that takes confidence. It takes a while to build that position and that trust in yourself. Yeah. Because confidence, really, that trust that what you're saying is actually what you mean, like you can carry it through. Yeah. So I said the one thing I would say with building that confidence is, at the beginning, you probably want to have somebody that you're borrowing that confidence from. So imagine if, say, you and I were working together, you don't have as much experience, I have all the experience, I can impose some of that or impart some of that confidence to you, because if you come to me with something, I can say, no, go back and do this, right? Yeah. So that confidence can be borrowed. But over time, you start to build your own confidence, because now you know what strategies work for you. You now know, you've tried different things, and no, that doesn't work for me. I can't do HMOs. It's not for me. You now have more confidence to be able to then have, have a serious conversation about where your own goals lie and all of that. So when we're dealing with builders, I think you really have to get that confidence in terms of being able to just understand what it is you want them to deliver for you, and then be very clear about where the money is coming from, when the money is coming out. Don't let them dictate when they get paid. I think really it's about the money. If you can manage the relationship with the builder, i.e. interpersonal relationship, make sure you give them some, but also make sure that, it's like a give and take. So if there are days when they're down, then you also have to give them some leeway as well, because they're human. But for the most part, they have to know that you are not going to take any nonsense from them. Like if they're going to be messing about, then you're happy to walk away. So and that's the point I was trying to make, was I did tell him, I said, I can walk away from this. I'm not afraid of that, because I think that's what builders want to hold over women, especially anybody, to be fair. But, you have to be there and be ready. That look, and I was in my mind, I was calculating because the place was a complete tip. And I said, we've been working well together, but if I have to pull the plug on this guy, who will I call to take over? And as long as you always have a backup plan, this is what I'm talking about, backup plan. As long as, in my mind, I already had like 2 or 3 people I'll call. I know they'll try and price gouge me, but I would sooner do that than let him kind of take the upper hand, right? Yeah. But within reason as well.
Yeah. So, no, those are very good points. And I think control is very important in property as well, because you being an entrepreneur, you're in a business, so you have to be confident, you have to control everything that's happening. And if you show your builders that you are in charge, because you are in charge, you're the one who's paying for it. So it can't be the other way around. They can't be telling you what to do. So those are very good tips. There's also a question about, do you do mentoring for newbies at properties? I'm sorry,
at auctions. Yes, I do. In fact, I'm launching. I'm working on launching something soon where basically we have obviously the different stages, because with me and mentoring, I always say, only come to me when you're ready to implement a strategy. Let's not just talk about it and then you sit down for a course and then after 4 weeks then you don't really know what you're doing. No. We do a bit, then you go out. You do a bit and you go out, right? So that's the way I like to work. So I do mentoring for newbies at auction. We talk through the process. We talk through how you can build in all these, backup plans. And we're talking about all the, making sure you have your contingencies along the entire process. And then obviously I talk about auctions on a wider scale. So you have an idea of, from the end to end, what we're looking at. And at the end of the day, auctions are not auctions. They're just a means to an end. At the end of the day, there's always a strategy behind the auction, right? So it's either, like you said, HMO or single let or, even service accommodation, whatever strategy, students let, whatever it is, it's going to be against whatever, that strategy is always going to be sitting underneath, the auction process. So it's just about you understanding, okay, this is just a different way to source property and what's the best way to utilize it. Because I'm still finding properties in auction. In fact, my latest one is like, it's such a great deal that I think the seller is trying to pull out. But, but we'll see how that plays out. But
All right.
like I'm finding deals in auction, and there's always been this historical thing of, oh no, auctions is oversubscribed, and it is in some areas with some types of properties. But there's some that people are literally just walking past and they don't care about these areas, and it's just about spotting that. So yes, in a nutshell, I do.
Okay.
My
No, that's good. That's fantastic. You're London based, aren't you? And I assume you are also investing in London, aren't you?
Yes, completely.
So I guess a final question is, what would you say? Because a lot of people are living in London, but they invest outside of London.
Yeah.
What's your advice on that? Is it something that someone should consider, or does it depend on certain factors?
No, definitely. Like, I think the only reason why I'm investing in London is because I started 10, 12 years ago, right? So the price points were not ridiculous as they are now. And because of some of the strategies that I do, I don't have that much money left in by the time I'm done. So I'm okay to still invest in London, to be honest. But I think if you're starting out, your money goes a lot further. Like, I've looked at some other areas, definitely, that I've thought, you know what, if I was investing in these areas, I would have like triple the portfolio I have. But it's also a lifestyle thing as well, because I'm here with 2 kids. Like some people who have kids who are older, like yourself, like you can take off for like 3 nights, because I've done that before and it just didn't work. I remember I was super heavy pregnant and I was traveling 4 hours to Middlesbrough in the middle of God knows where, because I'd gotten a property that I was trying to develop, and I was just like, you know what, leave this, man. It's not for me. Maybe in the future. But so the point is, you have to look at your circumstance and where you are in your investment journey. And if you want to start out investing in say, the North, you get more for your money for sure.
Yeah.
I think that appreciation in the North is better. When I started, there was 0 appreciation in the North. I remember some of the properties were 20K. 5 years later, they were still 20K. Yeah. But in London, that's not the case. Like in London, literally, it was 100 and something K, it's 200K in 5 years or 6 years, right? So it's down to your own, what you're looking for. If it's cash flow, if it's capital appreciation, there are all these different things you need to be considering.
Okay, so, no, that's good. But I assume with your mentorship, those are the kind of things you would pick up with the mentee of what's the best area for you to invest in.
Correct. We at that first session, we're really looking at, okay, what is the strategy? Because the first thing we need to do, in addition to confidence, the next thing, clarity. Clarity is so ultra important with property, right? So once, there's some people that I've mentored where they just had no idea what they were looking for. They were just looking at properties. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And then we discussed what they needed, what their goals were. Then we know the type of property they should be buying. There's no need just looking at different properties. Now you know exactly the type of property to be looking for. The challenge now is to find that property in this market. But that's a different problem altogether. At least you know the clarity of what you're looking for. So that's the first session, is really to build in that clarity first. And then we can take things from there.
Okay. No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. I think that's us for this evening. Thank you so much, Dolapo, for answering all those questions. That was really good. I think our viewers have really enjoyed it. And thank you for everyone who tuned in and who was asking all the questions. We appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you, Dami.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for having me on as well. Really, really appreciate that. Always.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. Maybe we can do another session of just pure auction properties. Maybe you could show us some of the deals that you do as well.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
All right, then.
Take care.
Take
Bye.
care.